Now, we all know people, or we've heard the stories about people who married their high school sweethearts. Heck, maybe some of y'all. And it's an awesome thing when that happens. But then there are the times when marrying your high school sweetheart ends in an absolute disaster. And I think that's kind of how Nebraska fans must have felt after having to finalize the divorce with Scott Frost a couple years ago. See, sometimes branching out and meeting new people outside of your safe zone or what you're used to turns out to be the best option. Maybe someone like Matt Rhule. Now, he may not be as good looking as your old flame. He may not have provided the Husker faithful with rings and memories from a time ago that bring a smile to everybody's face. But I tell you what Matt Rhule can do. He can create new memories. He can create new smiles. And he may turn out to be the guy that, by going outside of the inner circle, is the catalyst to return back to those good times you missed so much. Right now, Nebraska isn't the butt of the joke. They're actually trending upwards. And they're bringing in the type of players at the most important positions that can return Nebraska to where they believe they truly belong, and that's amongst the big dogs of college football. Now, they aren't there yet, but Matt the Builder, he's turning the tide. One could even say he's preparing for a big harvest season. So maybe Frost as a coach was more good luck Chuck than hometown hero who won state and was the prom king. And like I said, sometimes going outside of the comfort zone can end up making you the most comfortable. We shall see, but Nebraska fans should be confident because the future looks brighter than it has in a very long time. David Cone, former Michigan quarterback, my brother, former Western State Colorado wide receiver. We're going to break down their schedule and break down their team, but it does seem when you talk about Nebraska and you hear people talking about Nebraska, it's no longer, hey, you're a fossil, you're a dinosaur, you guys will never be trending upward or have a chance to get back to where you were. Not saying you'll go on some crazy run like they did during the 90s and before that when they had Stunkeiler and Hoofenhauser and Schnagenbacher and all those guys.
Look, Schnagenbacher
was good. Definitely a guard. But David, Nebraska, there's hope. And there should be hope. I watched Dylan Raiola, right? He's going to go through the ups and downs, so we're going to get into the team. But if you're a Nebraska fan, right now, in this snapshot in time, how are you not more confident for not only this year, but for the future, right? I mean, do you feel that the way I feel it?
Sure. Nebraska football hasn't had a winning season in 8 years.
That's wild.
8 years. I had to triple check it when I saw this stat today. That is absolutely unacceptable. When you talk about the greatness of the Nebraska football brand, how storied this program is, the support that they get from the fans you're talking about, 50-year sellout record of the stadium? I mean, Nebraska fans are so diehard. I love it, and they keep showing up, even though this program hasn't had a winning season in 8 years. I wasn't super pumped about the Matt Rhule hire right when it happened.
Because it's not sexy.
It's not sexy, but then again, and that's a conversation we had a year ago. Like, does Nebraska need a sexy hire to break an 8-year trend of not even having a winning season? Or is Matt Rhule the kind of guy who can come in and do similar things to what you were saying that Brian Kelly could do at LSU? Come in and be the stepdad sort of figure that you didn't know you needed, but this is what you need right now as a program. But then watching what Matt Rhule did last year, especially the PR, the way he marketed himself as the head coach to set the tone and the culture with the videos in the locker room and things like that, I was all about it. I loved it. And I mean, look, it just shows you how important the quarterback position is, that's really what held them back a season ago. And even then, they were on the cusp of making a bowl game. So 8 seasons since they've had a winning year. They're going to have to start Dylan Raiola at quarterback. There's going to be growing pains with a young guy like that. But when we look at this schedule, you guys look at this and tell me if it's so front-loaded or back-loaded, really front-loaded favorably, you couldn't ask for anything more if you're going to start a young guy at quarterback.
Yeah, and Blaine, Nebraska and Matt Rhule kind of reminds me of Ryan Reynolds from the Just Friends movie.
Okay.
Remember in high school,
great movie.
They made fun of him. You know, he wasn't like the cool guy that had the motorcycle and was the quarterback, whatever. But then all of a sudden, you flash forward, late 20s, early 30s, now he's looking like the best guy that could have taken the job over, including Scott Frost, who is always be a legend. The way it went down with Scott Frost in Nebraska will never take away from what he did as a player. Sure. I want to make sure I point that out. But Matt Rhule's looking like the best guy in town to go ahead and saddle up to. And, he's vice president of the construction company. He drives a Tesla, right? He's been playing the stock market good.
Yeah, well, see, I'm not one of the guys who just preseason drinks the Kool-Aid of certain teams. But regardless of the brand, if you look at Nebraska's football team this year, it feels like it's year 3 with Matt Rhule.
Yeah.
Like, it really does. You're bringing back a freshman quarterback. I mean, you're bringing in a freshman quarterback. We don't know. Is he a great talent? For sure. They could go 10-2 or 4-8, right? But you look at last year, right, with winning 5 games, they had a -17 turnover differential.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy. And if you get that down to 13 or 12, they're probably bowl eligible. What, your top 3 in the nation, and bringing back what? Production on both sides of the ball. A great defense. And what hurt you the most last year? That was quarterback. And now you bring in the phenom, the guy who can change it all, who I've seen a couple clips. I mean, he looks talented. But right now, if you look at this Nebraska team, they're one of those teams this year that could be a dark horse to make the playoff. And it's not like this will be the last year, I think, that Nebraska will be irrelevant in college football.
Well, and again, I think Tony White not going anywhere at the end of last year with the season Nebraska had defensively. Don't forget, it wasn't just like they were good at one thing or they could stop one style of offense. Like, I watched them literally play multiple games against totally different schemes and systems, especially in the beginning of the year, and they were able to shut down both of them. The game plan they had for Colorado, and look, I know Colorado was absolute garbage up front, right? But the game plan that Tony White and them put together at Nebraska kept them in that game. Then you look at a team like they played Minnesota early last year, which is totally different. I think this team has better players. I think the players are better, including quarterback. I would take Dylan Raiola, who has not taken a legitimate college snap in a game, over Jeff Sims right now. Last year, their leading rusher was the backup quarterback that came in and replaced Sims, Harburg or whatever his last name was. Mm-hmm. So when I look around him, the talent's better. I think the talent's going to be better up front. And then defensively, you look at this unit, this could be a top 10 defense in the country with Tony White there, with better players, with kind of what they did through the portal. David, I like the way they're built. I like their future. Anytime you have a new quarterback, we've said this about Nico, especially a young guy. We've said this about Jackson Arnold. We say this about Lenora Sellers. You can go down the list, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, whatever. You're going to have ups and downs. But I think Dylan Raiola may be the most ready to play early outside of guys that played last year in the bowl game, right? So
which Nico did.
Yeah, Nico did, right? And Jackson did, honestly. But Jackson, turned the ball over a decent amount. You're going to have ups and downs. But we're going to bring up the schedule. I think Dylan Raiola, he's close to ready.
And Nebraska's in a different position than Tennessee is, right, Josh?
For sure.
A couple more years. But I agree with you. Like, they're in a position as a program where you have to start Dylan Raiola. Just being the highest rated recruit that you brought in a long time and being a Nebraska legacy. Now, I say all that saying if things are fairly comparable in camp, right? Like, the kid just can't go out and underperform and win the job. And Matt Rhule wouldn't allow someone to win the job. But you understand there's going to be growing pains. But I want to ask both of you guys this, being coaches. The standard for Nebraska is to align themselves at the top of the conference with Michigan, with the Buckeyes, even with Penn State and what Wisconsin's been able to do in the conference. How do you set that as your goal while also, prepping people that 7-5 is very possible, 8-4 is very possible, and that is a good thing and that's positive momentum?
Well, I say the same thing about Auburn in the situation that they're in. The standard should never change, right? Because the minute the standard changes, you fall behind the rest of the big dogs. Everybody needs to think they're the best looking person when they walk into the bar. That's how you have to operate. But on the other hand, reality does have to be accepted at points. Knowing that the standard is that high, but realizing we're building because of circumstances, whether the head coach didn't work out and you got a bunch of guys taken out of the transfer portal, people still understand that even with the new transfer portal rules, building a team does take time. I used to think a coach had 3 years before this transfer portal stuff. Now you have 2. So I think Nebraska fans who, by the way, I've told you guys multiple times, I think Nebraska may have the smartest fans in college football because whenever the road team, when we were at South Alabama and we went and played up there, we're used to people, flicking us off, telling us we suck when we get off the bus and we land. These people were, hey, guys, welcome to Lincoln. I was having to tell my guys it was reverse psychology. They're trying to lull us to sleep so we don't go out there and play as vicious as usual. Even at halftime of a game we're losing, we're running back in the locker room. Nebraska fans are like, you guys can do it. Like, y'all can do it. It was the craziest thing ever. So the standard should never change, but there's points where reality has to be accepted. And I think Nebraska, listen, if you've waited this long,
Yeah.
I think you can wait one more year of 8-4 to finally have a chance to get back to that precipice. I do want to pull their schedule up. We got the phone lines open at 2:45 p.m. Central. There is no guest today. We want to hear from you guys. Doesn't matter what you want to talk about. We want to hear from y'all. Going to get to the chat as well in a minute. But let's go and bring up Nebraska's schedule. Because, boys, I want us to go through this game by game, and you guys tell me win or loss right now. Again, not going to hold you to it. We got to see what happens in fall camp. Those are our final predictions, which I can't wait for. But UTEP, week 1, I think we can agree, win.
Yep,
win.
Right? Colorado, week 2, it's a revenge game for Nebraska. They can catch a snap. I still don't think
And
Colorado's good enough up front. I think that's a win.
Agreed.
Northern Iowa, I think that's a win. Illinois at home, I think that's a win. I think Nebraska starts out 4-0. Then you go to Purdue. And some people are saying Purdue's being slept on. To a certain extent, I think Ryan Walters is going to get it figured out there. He was his first year as a head coach last year. But I like Nebraska in that game.
I do too.
At Purdue. Then you get Rutgers at home. Hell, David, I like them in that game.
They could start 6-0.
They could legitimately start 6-0. And then you go to Indiana. Kurt Cignetti is a dog. I don't think people are talking enough about how much of an absolute grinder and legitimate savant that Kurt Cignetti is. But it's going to take time at Indiana. I would not be shocked if Nebraska starts 7-0 and then gets their ass beat at Ohio State.
Yeah.
But then you come back and play UCLA at home.
Winnable game.
Very winnable. Go to USC. Let's just chalk that one up to a loss. All right? Let's say you're sitting at that point and you're what? 8-2 with 2 left? Then you got Wisconsin at home, which I think is a winnable game. And then let's say you go lose at Iowa. Boys, that's 9-3 right there.
Mm-hmm.
You go 9-3 in year 2, they'll start naming the corn after Matt Rhule.
I mean, it's very possible they start 7-0 now because of a young quarterback. Let's just say, hey, it's 5-2 instead. Let's say you can't figure out the Shedeur Sanders problem. Colorado ends up beating you at home and you lose to either Illinois or Rutgers. Even if you start 5-2 before that game at the Buckeyes, which I think is the only surefire loss on the schedule, at 5-2 there in your first 7, you're only a win away from the projected win total for the season. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, 7.5.
Oh, 7.5. Okay, well, then you'd be 2 wins away, but still. And it is back heavy, those last 5. That's not a lot of fun, but yeah, I think you're going to be competitive.
Well, I do think we can't sit up here and act like Illinois and Purdue and Rutgers aren't a tough out.
No, and this is the big
and
thing,
and with a new quarterback, Illinois, that's one team I'm very interested in this year. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Brett Bielema team, Purdue, not a talented roster, but it's on the road. And Rutgers, every time you play Rutgers, it's a 4-quarter slugfest.
Well, what scares you about Purdue is it is a new quarterback in Dylan Raiola, and that's his first road game. And Ryan Walters is a defensive guy. So they're going to have something put together for him. You know, it's typically a little bit of everything. It's not one thing. It's not like we're just going to pressure him the whole game. You do a lot of things. You show and you go. You show and you bluff. You bluff and you go. So that one, okay. Illinois at home, I like Nebraska in that game. I don't think they have enough firepower. Rutgers, I think, is a little bit slept on. I think Greg Schiano may be the only person on the planet that can win games at Rutgers. You know they're going to be good defensively. I've got to see the offense in the second year there. And again, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. But I think if we're sitting here looking at it preseason, man, I mean, 6-0, 5-1 is incredibly doable. But it starts with that Colorado game September 7th.
Yeah, it does.
That needs to be the snowball game that gets it rolling downhill in a good way. A lot of people are high on Colorado. We're not super high on Colorado here. I think Nebraska is the team that more people should be high on, that we should be talking about more of having that breakthrough season where I don't think they get into the playoff, but I think just the fact that we may be talking about Nebraska as a possible playoff team still on November 2nd and November 10th, I think that would be incredible for that program.
And regarding the scheduling, look, that's what the Big Ten wants. They want you to look at a schedule like that and for no team to be an automatic out, right? That's one of the things that makes predicting the SEC schedules so difficult because there is such carnage. So, I mean, look, the Big Ten would love nothing more than the middle and the bottom of the conference to be much stronger so that all of those games are competitive.
Yeah, and who do you not see on there? You don't see Penn State.
No Michigan.
You don't see Michigan. You don't see Oregon. You don't see Washington, who I think is going to take a step back just naturally with the attrition they had there. What's up, YouTube? If you think Keith Olbermann is smart, don't subscribe to this channel.